Hello and welcome to the Popcorn Junkies. I'm reviewing Parallel Mothers, a new Spanish film by the Spanish director Pedro Almodóvar. He's got a back catalogue of countless movies. I remember seeing some of his first movies when I was at university back in, when was that? 1993. Films like Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down, All About My Mother. Pain and Glory was the film that came out last year or the year before, starring Antonio Banderas. Really, really good film. Other films like Talk to Her and Matador. This film stars Penelope Cruz, who we love. It also stars Milena Smit, who I don't think I've come across before, who plays the sort of parallel mother, in a sense, to Penelope Cruz. This is also the film that rather contentiously on Instagram had its poster of a lactating nipple initially pulled down or banned and then pulled back up when an appeal was mounted against this. So it's had a bit of controversy around the poster. Well, it's the story of Penelope Cruz. She meets a chap on a photo shoot and one thing leads to another. They have sex. He's also an archaeologist, and so it's parked right at the beginning of the film, this idea that her great-grandfather was killed during the Spanish Civil War and was thrown potentially into a mass grave, not to be found. And so she asks this archaeologist whether he'll be able to help in the uncovering of wherever her great-grandfather was unceremoniously laid to rest. So that's parked at the beginning as a sort of historical context. There's a tug of history. There's a tug back to the ancestors of both the characters and of Spain itself. We then move on to she has sex with this archaeologist, she gets pregnant, but she really is insistent that she wants the baby on her own. Kind of suits him because he's got a wife who's undergoing chemotherapy. So they've had a bit of a frisson and Penelope Cruz gets pregnant. But she finds herself in an antenatal class, or antenatal ward rather, opposite Milena Smit. Now, this is the point at which they kind of connect, they both give birth to their children, and this is where the film kind of cranks into gear. I mean, the thing about Pedro Almodóvar is you always feel that comedy is just beneath the surface, even when it's quite a serious subject matter. This has that sense of sort of frivolity, or, you know, it's lots of big primary colours and what have you. There's a sort of jauntiness almost to the way he makes stuff. And so, undercutting this, essentially, this is a spoiler review, Penelope Cruz suspects that a mistake has been made at the hospital. And so we go through this rather sort of laborious process of her doing DNA tests of herself, DNA tests of her baby. She discovers that she's not actually the mother of her child, Penelope Cruz, but she bumps into the other mother, her parallel mother, who works in a cafe nearby to where she lives. And so a sort of curious friendship develops where Penelope Cruz kind of knows that this child isn't her own, but she's not entirely sure whether it's this other woman's and whether a straightforward swap has happened in the hospital. Well, it transpires there has been a swap. And I'm not going to give away one vital bit of information, but suffice it to say, the swap isn't equivalent or equal. And I think this is where the film could have been at its richest. I mean, quite a traumatic piece of information is delivered to Penelope Cruz. A comedy of sort of errors, of kind of mistaken identity, of the wrong DNA belonging to the wrong mother, confused babies, whose babies whose, all this kind of stuff. But as I say, there's this one particular moment where an incredibly dramatic piece of information lands, and virtually nothing was made of it. Now, Penelope Cruz, I think, was really good in this, but I just don't think she was given enough to work with. She didn't seem to have, that she wasn't afforded the space or the time to fill those reservoirs of depth that any mother would feel upon being told the news that she's told. And so consequently, the whole film kind of holds you somewhat at arm's length. I struggle with this film because, in a sense, there's ostensibly nothing wrong with it. I depart from many lovers of Pedro Almodóvar. A lot of people say, oh, his visuals are great, and in some of his films, his visuals have been interesting. I thought this film was shot in a really rudimentary fashion. Yes, there's lots of primary colours, but it was beyond functional. Very functional, 2 shots, single shots, what have you. So in a sense, there's this odd moment where the biggest piece of drama in the film is sort of brushed over and rushed over really swiftly. And you're left sort of thinking, whoa, hang on a minute, what about that major piece of information that we've just had delivered? Go and see it for yourself if you want to know. I mean, and it's a really dramatic, potentially one of the most traumatizing pieces of information you could possibly be given. And Penelope Cruz moves through it quite quickly. That's the odd thing. And so there's tension between the younger mother and the older mother. They are the parallel mothers, but they kind of, their paths, well, I suppose parallel does mean they run like that, but their paths kind of intersect and then they move apart again. The whole film, as I say, is bookended with this initial setting of this, this archaeological Spanish Civil War heritage type thing. And then the film ends with the sort of solution or conclusion of what happens to that archaeological exploration. And in a weird way, there was something much richer to be uncovered, no pun intended, or dug up around this archaeological dig. The sense of heritage and lineage, and the idea that they'll end up having to sort of do DNA tests on the skeletons to check who relates to who, and then in a weird way that reflects neatly, or could have reflected more neatly, on all the sort of DNA tests that Penelope Cruz is doing with her child. So in a sense, I suppose the film's themes are, who belongs to who, what belongs to what. If a child is yours and you're looking after it, but it isn't you discover it isn't yours. Is it nature versus nurture? Is your child your child if you think it's your child? And I thought that for me would have been the richest, most sort of challenging part of this film, if it had really explored Penelope Cruz's psychology around the idea that this child that she thinks is hers might not be hers or isn't hers, and then how does that impact on her relationship with that child? It's dealt with, but it's thrown away. It's absolutely thrown away. And for me, that could have been the real heart of this. It felt like, it very much felt like women's issues, complicated, complex, psychological, hormonal, emotional female issues, were given the treatment by quite clearly a very male director. Okay, he's gay, but there was a real sense of this being told through the eyes and through the heart and the mind of what a male director assumes women would be feeling. And I'm kind of surprised, because I'd have thought that Penelope Cruz could have brought a bit more sophistication to it. But I go back to the fact that Almodóvar is very blocky. He blocks out his scenes. It's like shot, shot, shot. And there's no sort of fluidity, and then there's no room for the camera to be exploring psychological motivation and all that kind of stuff. It's just quite bland. I found this film bland. I think it was a rich opportunity to explore a really complex dilemma of birth, of motherhood, of the maternal instinct, of belonging, of, as I said, nature versus nurture. I think it could have been a really rich and complicated, and they could have still kept a slightly comedic flavour to this. In the end, it just felt like a stone skimming across the surface. But in the end, this is one of those films that has all the right ingredients, but they just haven't been mixed together in the right way. I think it's a missed opportunity. Would I recommend going to see it? It's a tough one. I think for the very moment, for the dramatic moment at the centre of this film, it is worth seeing. But I slightly worry you might be disappointed with how the director deals with it afterwards.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.